Why did she do this, and did she meet the bar?
Great to have you here, brother.
Thanks,
it's all yours.
All right, we welcome you to the fairest network on television, and we come on the air tonight with breaking news from the campaign trail. Kamala Harris just gave the biggest interview of her life. Less than 3 weeks till the election, there are very, very few opportunities to change the momentum in her favor. And she needs a reset. Tonight provided the perfect opportunity.
My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership.
Exactly what those new ideas were harder to come by. But that's farther than she has gone before in distancing herself from Joe Biden. More on that interview in a moment. And more importantly, where she goes next. What are her options after going on Fox News? But first tonight, the stakes could not be any higher. We are 19 days out from the election. And there are a few things you need to be closely watching: the polls, the models, and the betting markets. Before you can understand the interview, you need to understand why she did the interview. Over the past month, Harris has been trending down. Donald Trump has been trending up. The big Mo, as George H.W. Bush used to say. But the latest polling from NBC News shows Harris and Trump are tied, 48 points each in the national horse race. Chuck Todd of NBC News told our buddy Chris Cillizza the actual difference in that poll right there was 3 interviews out of 1,000 people polled. That is how equally divided America is right now. The presidential forecast from our partners at Decision Desk HQ is incredibly close. Harris holds at 50.5264%. Trust the nerds to get it down to the 4th decimal point. That is Kamala Harris's chance of winning. It's a coin flip. Most importantly, that's moved 4 percentage points in Trump's favor since the last model. Unquestionably, Trump is doing substantially better at this time than he was against Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden in the past 2 cycles. Just look at the comparison from the Real Clear Politics polling average on this day. It's stunning. NPR writes, the race is headed in Trump's direction. The former president appears to be in the driver's seat, he writes. NPR's own election college forecast shows Trump holding a slight advantage, 246 to 266 in the race to 270. They project the race comes down to just 5 states: Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. And tonight, we got an October surprise nobody expected. Kamala Harris sat down with Fox News for an interview. And we noticed that in this interview, day by day, she is ratcheting up the attacks on Donald Trump, using the same tactic that didn't work for Joe Biden. Now we are back to July, June even, calling Donald Trump a threat to democracy.
He has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it.
We start tonight with Chris Cillizza, journalist, senior advisor at the DGA Group, Sean Spicer, NewsNation contributor, former White House press secretary, and Shaniqua McClendon, vice president of political strategy at Crooked Media. Nice to have all of you here. Thank you. Cillizza, good to have you along for the show as well. Spicer, start with you.
Thank you.
This was designed to reach out to moderate, either Republicans or independents who watch Fox News, who were, shall we say, Harris curious?
Kamala curious.
Kamala curious. I'll go for you for the alliteration. Did she give them reason to be more than curious?
I don't think so. I mean, the immigration answer off the bat was disqualifying.
That was the first topic.
That was the first topic, but it went on and on and on because she can't answer the question. And I give Brett a lot of credit for going back to the question. Okay, these were your policies. You repealed 90 executive orders out of the gate. Don't talk about a bill that happened 3.5 years later. Talk about the policies that you implemented and acted on right out of the gate. She couldn't answer that question. I think that's the number one issue facing a lot of voters. A lot of people tune into Fox, at least. Immigration, border security, right up there at the top. And for people who were Kamala curious, that wasn't going to satisfy them. And then at the end to say, I'm going to be very different from Joe Biden. She's got an authenticity problem, Leland. Over and over again, she'll say what she has to say, use the accent that she has to use to whatever audience she's speaking to. And today was another example of I'll say whatever I have to say depending on who I'm talking to. Tonight didn't move the needle.
All right. Saliza, you're with us. This was the topic of your morning note this morning. There are moments in politics that we all go back and remember, right? When races turned on that one moment. Did anything in this interview strike you as something that on November 5th, we're going to be sitting around going, oh, well, this is when everything changed?
I wish I was smart enough to say yes, but can I give you, Leland, I'll give you the one thing that stood out to me, that if she wins, and I do think it's a coin flip, as you rightly noted, if she wins, it will be because of that answer you played in the open, which is, I'm paraphrasing, I'm not Joe Biden. Now, the truth of the matter is, we've talked about this before, she should have said that 2.5 months ago, and she certainly should have said it last week on The View. I actually think Sean has a point here with the authenticity issue. I don't know if voters follow it closely enough that they know on The View she said I wouldn't do anything different, and then today she said I'd be different. I don't know if they watch both of those things. Obviously, I consume all that stuff. I don't know if the average voter who's undecided at this point does. But if she does win, it will be because someone in her campaign or she realized you cannot link yourself to a president who is at 40% approval or lower and who's handling of immigration and the economy, the two most important issues to voters. You can't do it.
Okay, I got Spicer nodding along. I don't have... Yeah, but we're going to give Shaniqua a chance here. We saved the best for last in the roundtable here. Was there anything she said that's going to get her in trouble with Democrats?
I actually think her going on Fox is also something that Democrats will appreciate. They got to see her just go really hard at Brett in this interview. She didn't get her second debate with Donald Trump, but she got an opportunity here to debate one of his biggest cheerleaders, if you will.
I'm not sure that's fair, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, I work at Crooked Media, so,
Consider the source.
I do think that this is something that's going to make Democrats happy seeing her fight, but I also think that the Republicans who are Kamala curious are actually going to be excited, or maybe excited's not the word, but impressed to see her go toe-to-toe and not shrink. Donald Trump has been asked to do unfriendly media several times. He has not done that.
Wait, hold on. To be fair, there's not a lot of media that is friendly to Donald Trump, and he did 90 minutes with Bloomberg yesterday.
There's a reason. I think they're fair.
He did 90 minutes with Bloomberg. He's done NBC Meet the Press. So just he has done adversarial media.
Hasn't helped him, though.
Well, that may be true. So we've got a couple of different back and forths here between Bret Baier and Kamala Harris that were important. Since you talked about immigration first, we'll play the immigration one going back and forth. Take a listen.
How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
just a number. Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a rough estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country.
Look, the problem is, in politics, there are narratives that set in. Somebody's a prolific fundraiser, they're a good interviewer, whatever it is. the border is not something that she's strong on. And so this is a weakness of hers. I think the answer that she gave shows that they have a problem. They bragged when they came into office about undoing Donald Trump's policies. That set in as the narrative. They were proud of that. And now to claim after years of saying the border is secure, the border is secure, the border is secure, your new talking point is, we've known this for decades. Okay, well, if you've known it for decades, why did you do the things that you did at the beginning? You can't have it both ways. That's the problem they have.
Well, you can't have it like 9 different ways, which is sort of how she seemed to want to have it in the interview. Shaniqua, 56% of Americans, that includes 25% of Democrats, a vast majority of Republicans, and almost a majority of independents, want every illegal American deported. They support mass deportation. Why is it so hard for Kamala Harris to come on and say, look, we were wrong to rescind all of the Trump era policies, and we don't think there should be mass deportation, but if you are a felon who is here illegally, we're going to deport you, and I am going to end sanctuary cities as a president. Why is that so toxic to meet so much of America, 56% of America, in the middle?
So you mentioned undocumented immigrants, people who are crossing the border illegally. Trump made it harder for asylum seekers to get into this country. And so I think that's why when President Biden and Kamala Harris were elected, that is something they focused on reversing. You're right. Democrats, immigration has never been something that they have been seen as leaders on.
I don't know. Bill Clinton's State of the Union address was pretty strong.
Nancy Pelosi was strong in condemning George W. Bush. I agree. In the last decade, you're right.
Yes. Well, I'm a little younger, so I'm looking at how long I've been working in politics.
Fair enough.
All right. We know who the winner of this panel is.
Wow.
So during that time, it's not an issue that Democrats have been leading on, but a lot of things have changed. Regardless of how you feel about immigration, the political landscape has changed where you're right. A lot more Democrats now are having concerns. Whether some of what I think are stunts pulled by Governor Abbott and Ron DeSantis, they've impacted people. Sending a lot of these migrants to these states have put pressure. Now, a more progressive response, I think, that the Democrats could have provided is providing these cities with more resources. That's what's at issue here. A lot of people in these cities feel like there's a strain on our resources. And there are, because these cities want to help these migrants. But I still think it's smart for her to point out the fact that they did get there. And that's what people want to see are solutions.
Hold on. But to answer your question, part of this is political, right? The base, and Shanika's right, I mean, their base, a lot of their younger voters like her, don't have a problem with this. They want to allow people to come. And so she's got to find that balance. And the reason she can't answer the question, to your point, is because she's got to be careful 19 days out of an election of alienating a key part of the people that are knocking on the phones, knocking on the doors and making the phone calls as part of their base.
I got to get to one more soundbite. But thank you very much. Yeah. Last time I checked. You never know.
On the cup.
Yeah. All right. So there was one moment, I think, in terms of what you were saying, of her really going toe-to-toe with Bret Baier over an issue that is central to Kamala Harris's argument of I am not Donald Trump. And this was a back and forth over how Donald Trump talks about using the military to go after his political enemies. Take a listen.
We asked that question to the former president today. Harris Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So, Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
Well, he was asked about that specific...
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you.
That was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that.
All right, so Lizzie, you get the last answer. I didn't give it to Spicer because he would have taken 5 minutes. You get the last minute at least. Okay. This is the question. So many of her answers came back to essentially, I'm not Donald Trump. When she was asked about Joe Biden's health, what'd you know and when'd you know it? Well, I'm not Donald Trump. He's not Donald Trump. Is that enough to change the momentum that she needs to change?
Yeah, I mean, First, I would say, and you mentioned this at the top, Leland, but remember the audience. Why is she going on Fox News? Because there's a chunk of undecided voters. It's, I think, a decent-sized chunk of all the undecided voters who are Republicans who like Donald Trump's policies, as you've noted, on things like immigration and the economy, but do not like Donald Trump. They don't like him personally. They think he's a bully. They do not want to vote for him, but they also don't know if they can vote for Democrats. So all I think she was trying to do is say, hey, look, I'm not this crazy character that's been drawn of me, by the way, a lot of times on Fox News. I am a credible, serious person. And, oh, yeah, I'm not that guy you don't like. Remember, she is not aiming really at the Republican base. They're not going to vote for her. She's not aiming at the Democratic base. They're already voting for her. We are talking about a very small 5, 6, 7, 8%. And within that small chunk of undecided voters, Republicans who are undecided, she needs to win some sliver of those people who voted for Nikki Haley even after the primaries were effectively over. That's who the audience was, and that's why she talked so much about Trump.
And there was times even after Nikki Haley dropped out that she was getting 20% of the vote. So in the primaries, so there are people there to be reached. Our research would say many of them are watching NewsNation. So we're glad to have the discussion. Sliza, good to see you. Sean, Shaniqua, thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. All of the Democratic panic, and there is Democratic panic, is based on polling. But the polls were wrong in 2016 and 2020. Ted will show you why Republicans are way too confident right now. Watch cable TV, listen to the radio. All you hear about is Kamala Harris doing poorly with black men. And that is true. But when all the media is talking about one thing, it is often helpful, and it's what we do here, it's why you watch, to talk about something else, because that's normally the real story. As bad as Kamala Harris is doing with black men, that won't matter if Trump keeps hemorrhaging some more support among white women. Just take a look at the Republican Party's last few election cycles. Mitt Romney won white women by 9 points. In 2016, Trump only led by 6. In 2027, in 2024, Trump only leads by 1 point among white women. To try and fix that, Trump participated in a town hall with an all-female audience. Smart place to go if you're trying to help your case with white women at 11 a.m. Eastern, when a lot of people are at home. A lot of women are at home. It's when the View's on. This could have been an incredible opportunity to take back his substantial lead. Instead, he did this.
Get this question because I believe that's what this is about.
Oh, I want to talk about IVF. I'm the father.
You don't hear that every day.
I'm the father of IVF, so I want to hear this question. I said, no, we're totally in favor of IVF. I came out with a statement within an hour, a really powerful statement with some experts, really powerful, and we went totally in favor. The Republican Party, the whole party. Alabama legislature a day later overturned, meaning approved it, overturned, the judge essentially approved it. And we really are the party for IVF.
With us now, Lee Carter, president partner, Lansky and Partners, Morgan Harper, Democratic strategist, former U.S. candidate for Senate in the state of Ohio, the Buckeye State. Nice to see both of you ladies. Appreciate it. Lee, is abortion and anything involving women, reproductive rights, IVF, contraception, a little bit like the border for Democrats, that if they are talking about it, they are losing?
It's a really important issue in a certain set of voters, and I think that's why it keeps coming up. There are a number of women who say the primary reason they're going to go to the polls is to protect reproductive freedoms. And there's a whole generation of women that's been taught if you don't vote for Democrats, you're going to lose your rights and you're going to lose your freedoms. And so I think that's why they're talking about it so much. And I think it's the only issue that Democrats are really winning on. So I can understand why they're saying it over and over again, but I don't think it's the only issue that's important to female voters. And I think that that's a bigger issue for Democrats as well.
Morgan, this from our friend Bacha Ungar Sargon. Gender divide is a class divide. Harris appeals to men, in other words, are actually designed to reassure college-educated women that the Democratic Party exists to advance their interests. The American dream comes from a college education. Abortions will be legal up to the 9th month. The future is female. It turns out liberal women still want their men donning camo so long as they vote for the party that shipped their jobs overseas to China. They want men to support their side of the culture war and vote against their economic interests. What does Kamala Harris and Democrats have to offer to men other than we are going to protect a woman's right to choose?
Well, I think it's both something to offer to men and then also, and this is kind of building off the other panelist's point, a different type of woman. I do think there's no mistaking that abortion rights are a very big motivating factor for a lot of women in the United States right now, and it's pushing them to move towards Democrats. But it is also the case that for a lot of working class people overall, men and women, particularly those that are in the middle to lower middle class, economic issues are key. And so, I think that Vice President Harris, especially in these final weeks of the campaign, yes, needs to continue to gin up the base that is quite secure of women. If they know that she's running and that she is a Democrat and that she is on the side of reproductive freedom, they are likely to support her. But that cannot be at the neglect of continuing to hammer home the economic messages that are going to be, for example, standing up to large corporations, speaking to the economic uncertainty that a lot of Americans feel, for example, about healthcare costs and what her administration plans to do about it.
Lee, I think about this just in terms of strategy. And we talk often about whether Democrats are paying high enough a price, whether they're going far enough to the center to attract voters, and whether they're willing to tell their base to shove it on all sorts of issues, immigration being one of them, to try and appeal to the center. Are Republicans, is Donald Trump doing enough to tell the far extreme of the Republican Party on abortion to shove it and move to the center to attract suburban white women or to save suburban white women?
He's trying pretty hard to do that. I think that's why he's focusing so much on IVF. I think that's why he had Melania out there. I don't think he had Melania, but Melania was out there talking about how she was, in fact, pro-choice. Donald Trump has often said that he thinks this is a losing issue for Republicans, and this is not something that he necessarily agrees with. He does say it should be up to the states' rights. I think when he had one of his podcast interviews, they asked him a question about his son being at NYU, and they said, do you think this was the right time, really, to have Roe versus Wade overturned? And he was like, yeah, you're kind of right. And it humanized it. It sort of made him seem like he understood the issue. So I think he's out there doing the best he can, given what he's got. But it is a really, really tough issue for Republicans. It's not the popular choice among Americans. It is a popular choice, though, among extreme Republicans, and they need to keep their base.
Yeah, it's been very hard. It is the reflexive image of immigration. Morgan, we've seen at times Republicans jump the shark on immigration. They don't seem to be doing it right now if you think about where the polling is. How do Democrats what's the strategy for Democrats to keep moderate Republicans from not feeling Democrats are too extreme on this?
Well, I do think it's important to continue to recognize that we have an immigration problem. We can't ignore that. And so our messaging can't pretend as if that isn't an important issue to a lot of Americans. And it's not just a coastal issue anymore, as we know. I mean, Ohio, we have become the epicenter of a lot of this discussion with Springfield and Haitian immigrants. But that's key is, yes, there is a problem, but exactly what we've seen Kamala Harris do throughout the campaign is remind voters that there was a solution presented, that it was bipartisan, that it was in Congress, that we had a Republican senator who was willing to support it. And
we heard it in her interview. We heard it in her interview, and that's a question. That's a question whether that is enough for voters, or whether they go back to the Biden-Harris policies before that solution was proposed, and whether those are the problems. Ladies, thank you very much. We appreciate both of you. It's good to see you. The polls that we keep talking about are going to be wrong. Trust me. In which direction and by how much, we don't know. We're going to tell you why you should look at the polls, and Republicans especially should look at the polls quite skeptically this time around. The state of play 19 days out from the election is abundantly clear. The polls and models are closer than at any point in American history. Of course, Republicans always remind us in 2016 and 2020, pollsters undercounted Trump's support. And today, Trump is doing much better 3 weeks from the election than he was doing in 2016 against Clinton or 2020 against Biden. It is stunning how much closer the race appears, hence why the betting markets give Donald Trump a significant edge. On the poly market, where people bet hundreds of millions of dollars on the outcome, just go through the swing states. Arizona, Trump up 36. Georgia, Trump up 30. Michigan up 10. Pennsylvania up 18. Nevada up 2. Altogether, Trump is a 17.2% favorite. If you look back, Trump trailed Harris as recently as August. Yet the model from our partners at Decision Desk HQ, virtual tie, 50-50, coin flip. That's how close it is. But the models and the betting markets swing drastically based on the polls. Leland Vittert, professor of data science at Washington University in St. Louis, also senior data scientist for Decision Desk HQ, also known as my mother's favorite child, is with us now. Liberty, thank you. Pollsters realized they undercounted white working class men in 2016, 2020. They've adjusted by adding more of them into their models. Who is to say they are not undercounting single white women, otherwise known as Taylor Swift fans, voting for Kamala Harris in 2024?
You know, I think there's nothing to say that they're not doing that. I think what's clear is that pollsters have been pretty good in the past about counting people, except when it comes to Trump. You know, in 2016, they undercounted him by about 5 points, enough that it switched it so that he won. In 2020, they said Biden was going to win by 10. He only won by 5. So again, they undercounted Trump by 5, although it wasn't enough to switch to have Trump win. I don't think it's that out of the question that they're also undercounting him by 5 again, which means he would actually potentially win by a landslide this time.
Well, yeah, then he would win the popular vote, which Republicans have not done in an awfully long time. Think about it in terms of momentum right now that we see. Kristen Davidson talking about momentum. Take a listen.
Trump has momentum right now. And as we look in all these key states, particularly where you see the momentum really shifting is in that Rust Belt in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
In terms of momentum shift, when is the cutoff, as you guys go back and look at the data, that the momentum can't shift back?
About a week. About a week, if you look historically, is that a week out is when the momentum, if the momentum's there, you got a pretty good shot at winning. So there still is time for Harris to take back the momentum, but Trump has it in spades right now. I mean, the concept that he's switched Wisconsin and Michigan in the polls is pretty incredible, given where we were just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, it is definitely changed significantly. Liberty, thank you very much. Back to you throughout the next couple of weeks. Harris's campaign seems to believe the polls. That would explain the massive change in VP Harris's campaign. It started with joy, and then it went somewhere a little darker. Let's just review for a minute how things started back in July and August and how they are going now.
It's the summer of joy, and Kamala Harris is the joyful warrior.
The feeling joy. The joy felt by Americans backing the Harris-Walz ticket.
Let us choose joy!
Or listen to General Milley, Donald Trump's top general. He has called Trump, and I quote, fascist to the core. It's two very different visions for our nation.
The other is about fascism. Why can't we just say it?
Yes, we can say that.
Leaning into the threat of democracy didn't work for Joe Biden. But Kamala Harris seems to think it can work this time around, or maybe she thinks she doesn't have a choice. The campaign has abandoned all joy and chosen to capitalize on the fear of Donald Trump. A new ad featuring a few of Trump's former aides, like Kevin Carroll. Take a look.
Donald Trump, more dangerous, more erratic than ever before.
Echoing fascist.
The worst people are the enemies from within. The enemy from within are more dangerous than Russia. We have some very bad people. It should be very easily handled by the military.
I do remember the day that he suggested that we shoot people on the streets.
A second term would be worse. There will be no one to stop his worst instincts.
All right. Kevin Carroll is now with us now, former Trump Homeland Security official. Good to see you. Welcome to the program. I'm not going to question your sincerely held belief on this. Talk about that on a different day. Why do you think this message that Democrats have now hammering away at since January 6th of 2021 is not resonating?
I wish it would resonate, and I think perhaps it's because what former President Trump is saying is so shocking that people aren't taking it at face value. And I think that when somebody says what they're going to do, you should listen to them.
To be fair, Donald Trump has said a lot of things that were shocking that he has not followed through on. He's speaking hyperbolically. Is there not a reason to give him the benefit of the doubt, considering that we still have a Republican? He was in office for 4 years and things worked out pretty well, at least economically?
Here's the reason. He tried at least 4 times during his first term to misuse the military. He was stopped every time by John Kelly, by James Mattis, by Mark Esper, and ultimately by Mike Pence. So he tried to do it in the past, and I don't think the same people who stopped it last time are going to be around this time.
Okay. Your sincerely held belief, let the American people decide on that. Republicans such as yourself, and you've been a strong conservative, spoken out aggressively about conservative values, served in the Trump administration. They're going so far as to say, I am willing to support a Democrat because I am so scared about Donald Trump. Yet Democrats have not been willing, and Kamala Harris, even in today's interview, has not said that she is willing to give up a single progressive policy in order to woo skeptical Republicans, in order to save the country from Donald Trump. Does that concern you?
She did say she would put a Republican in a cabinet, which Biden didn't
everybody
do.
puts somebody in a cabinet. That's not saying I'm going to deport illegal aliens. That's not saying, no, I will not allow boys to play on girls' sports teams. That's not saying I'm going to make Mike Gallagher sec def. I mean, there's some things she could say that would change the conversation. She's not.
Sure, Gallagher would be a very good choice. I think the Constitution is the threshold issue. I mean, we can disagree on policy. I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican. I disagree with the Harris and Biden administrations on a lot of things. But if you don't have fidelity to the Constitution, you have nothing.
I'll give you the last word. Again, if that is the stakes, does it concern you that Kamala Harris is not willing to reach across the aisle more?
I think she's making an effort to reach across the aisle, as shown by her event today and by having people such as me involved in her campaign.
All right. Kevin, it's good to see you. Thanks very much. Anybody who stands on principles, more than welcome here. We appreciate it. We wrote a lot about this in War Notes today, a lot about Kevin, who I've had a lot of respect for a very long time. Warnotes.com to subscribe for free. It's our email newsletter. Comes out at 4 o'clock every day with our thoughts on the most important stories of the day. Remember Tim Walz? He was supposed to be Kamala Harris's connection to white working class men. He's now been dispatched on hunting trips. Will he ever return when we come back? Trolled J.D. Vance this weekend over comments about Minneapolis.
People talked about how Minneapolis had one of the great quality of lives 5-6 years ago, but thanks to the leadership of Tim Walz has now become overrun with crime, increased rates of violent crime, and so to the point where a lot of people feel like it's easier to move out of Minneapolis than to build a life here.
Yes, Minneapolis has suffered, wrote the congressman. We can agree that both parties have failed our communities for generations, and we agree a lack of consequences is a vitamin for crime. But please do not come to us to shame, blame, and fearmonger. Come with ideas, solutions, and inspirations. Well, that is the Congressman Dean Phillips. So where is Tim Walz? And why hasn't he spent much time defending his state, especially not to the media? It's harder to get for an interview than Kamala Harris. With us now, Congressman Dean Phillips. Good to see you, sir. I think reasonable people can agree that Tim Walz as a VP has been a disappointment as a VP pick. Certainly hasn't delivered in the way Kamala Harris and Democrats thought he would. Are you surprised?
Well, first of all, Leland, good to be with you. I've known Tim Walz for many years, and I hired a number of his staff members for my own congressional team in Washington. And Tim's a good man, and I think he's been a good governor. I don't think that this campaign so far has done justice to him, to be forthright. And frankly, I wish Vice President Harris, when asked questions, would be a little bit more direct with American people, because I think there is a massive appetite and a lot of dismay about politicians who simply try to avoid questions. So I know Tim Walz. I would like to see him shine, and I think that's part of this campaign that has got to put him in a position to do so. And the notion of holding Tim Walz accountable for what happened in Minneapolis after George Floyd's murder is, to me, just absurd. And that's why I took so unkindly to J.D. Vance, who I don't know if he's ever been to Minneapolis before, to come to my city and tell us what a disaster it is. That's exactly the kind of fear-mongering nonsense, BS, frankly, that Americans, I think, are tired of.
Okay, but to be fair to J.D. Vance, almost every day he's taking questions from the press. He's out there having the conversation. and Tim Walz is not. So who is the greater of acting like a politician?
Leland, I hear you. In fact, two things can be true at once. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump
so why do you think
answer questions pretty directly. And by the way, let me finish.
Why are they playing hide Tim Walz?
I'm dismayed too. That's exactly my point. I'm disappointed. I think Tim Walz and Kamala Harris should be answering questions, should be available, accessible, and direct, and town halls, and not scripted and not measured. I think that's why Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are actually doing quite well right now. Now, what they say is deeply disconcerting to many of us, but I think they're hitting something that's really important to American people, which is at least expressing themselves, whether you like it or not. And this notion of measured, calculated, controlled media circumstances is really, I think, working against them. Time is short, and I would like to think that we'd see more of that. I think that's why they are not doing well amongst independents and moderate Republicans. And that's solvable only if they're put in a position to do so. And I'm suspecting that Tim Walz is being told to be limited in his responses, and that's not who he is. So I'm disappointed that he's not in a position to shine.
Now, look, he's the guy who ran away when asked about Hamas executing Israeli hostages. You have bucked your party. And it's one of the reasons I have great admiration for you, because you've been willing to say the truth when people knew it, but you were told to keep quiet, especially about Joe Biden's health way back when. Many people don't know you ran for president as a Democrat to try and get a conversation going about Joe Biden's health. Are you at that same point of panic over how Kamala Harris and Tim Walz's campaign is doing as you were about Joe Biden?
Well, Leland, I don't panic. In fact, I'm an optimist, and I'm hopeful, and I know America is going to be just fine as long as people participate. But my dismay about the two-party system, frankly, the duopoly, both private corporations that I don't believe are acting in the best interests of Americans. I think they are a big part of the problem. We have angertainment, that entire angertainment industry dividing us, and it's nonsensical. So my panic, if you will, occurred many, many months ago, and it wasn't about my party or Joe Biden. It was about this system that is not serving people. And I'm going to try to wake people up beyond my career in Congress to the truth, the corruption that we have legalized, to the incentive system, the perverse incentives that have politicians on both sides of the aisle covering up the truth and putting self-preservation above principle. I'm tired of it. We're seeing it play out every single day on evening cable news. And I'm telling you, I love all Americans, Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Independents, and I don't understand why this notion of condemnation is the rule of the day instead of invitation. That's who I am. I'm on a mission to try to do better, and I think we can.
All right. Dean Phillips, soon to be set free, but a man who always spoke his mind, even when in Congress. It's good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Leland.
All right. Kamala Harris keeps trying to solve her problem with black men. How bringing in the most popular black man in America has totally backfired.
This is wrong for President Obama. It is a wrong course for the Harris-Walz campaign to lay at the feet of black men when they have their reasons.
Kamala Harris is trying to solve two major problems over the next 20 days. One, she's hemorrhaging support among young black men. Two, everything she's doing to fix that problem is only making problem number one worse. With us now, the Honorable Nina Turner, former Ohio State Senator, Harrison Fields, former Assistant Press Secretary in the Trump administration. Good to see you both. Thank you. Nina, start with you. You made an awful lot of news on CNN pushing back against Barack Obama's, what do you want to call it, lecture to black men over not supporting Kamala Harris. Have you seen a change since that rally in how Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Democrats are dealing with this loss of support among black men?
Well, the vice president certainly put out a plan since then. And I want to say to her credit, when she was interviewed by the Black Journalists Association, she was asked a question about black men. And she did say that it should not be assumed that black men were going to vote for her, that she had to earn their vote just like anybody else. It was President Barack Obama who stepped on the messaging of Vice President Harris. And Leland, it is absolutely ludicrous for anybody to put at the feet of black men any potential loss that the Democrats may have, especially when black men have proven to be the most progressive voting bloc among males when it comes to giving women the opportunity to be president of the United States of America. In 2016, 81% of black men voted for Secretary Clinton, and only 32% of white men voted for her.
All right, Harrison, we saw a huge shift in black male support away from Democrats when Joe Biden was at the top of the ticket. To be fair, that number is shifting back to Kamala Harris. It's shifting back quite a lot. Is this going to end up being a non-story by November 5th?
Not at all. I think if you look at the numbers, if you look at the support that President Obama had when it came to black men 18 to 44, he was sitting at about 81 points advantage to the Republican in the race. The numbers today say that same category of voter is only about 41% to the advantage of the Democratic Party. That could be the election. I think what you're seeing now is kind of a reemergence or an awakening in the black community of what has the Democratic Party actually done for me, and what has Kamala Harris done for me as vice president? And I think a lot of black people, especially black men, are realizing the answer is very little to nothing when it comes to the actual policies. Kamala Harris can't really point to a single policy as vice president that has actually helped black men in America, and I think they're going to be voting accordingly. Now, black men, the black vote is going to be more heavily for the Democrats. That's usually how it is.
It's fair to say that the black vote is not monolithic. Number one, and young black men and older black men vote very differently. The age disparity there is real. Nina, the plan you talked about that was put out included legalizing marijuana and forgiving small business loans based on race. A number of black commentators have come out and said basically that's just insulting. Do you agree?
Well, we could parse that out, Leland. I'm saying she put out a plan. I'm not saying it's a perfect plan or that I necessarily agree with the plan. I mean, legalizing marijuana should have been something that had been done a long time ago, but at least she put out something. It's 3 weeks before the election.
3 weeks ahead of time. Fair enough.
I mean,
I hate to do this.
I'm not jumping
we
for
ran
joy
long
about
because
it.
we ran long because of Harris's interview. I want to keep this conversation going. It's a big one for the next couple of weeks. We'll have you both back. It's a great panel. Thank you both, Nina, Harrison. Good to see both of you. We're on our way to Vegas. There is the presidential race. There is also the race for control of the Senate, which will decide whoever is president, whether they get cabinet secretaries and whether they get the Supreme Court justices they want. It's huge. The debate's tomorrow in Nevada. We're there. Here's Chris.